At 6 a.m., my mother-in-law burst in demanding $7 million. My husband calmly said they'd already decided to use it for his brother. I didn't argue. I just walked away and left them with a surprise they'd never forget. The morning my marriage ended, I was barefoot in my kitchen at 5:47 a.m., holding a mug of lukewarm coffee I hadn't taken a single sip from. My eyes were swollen from a night of no sleep. The manila folder from the probate attorney's office was sitting on the counter beside me, still sealed, thick as a Bible. I'd waited 6 months for that folder. At exactly 6:02 a.m., my front door slammed open so hard the hallway mirror rattled on the wall. My mother-in-law, Linda Carter, came through first. Chanel sunglasses pushed up on her head, designer purse swinging like a weapon, her heels cracking against our hardwood floors like gunshots. Behind her was my husband, Ethan. Neither of them looked at me. They looked at the folder. "Is it done?" Linda demanded. No greeting, no good morning. She dropped her purse onto my armchair, my mother's armchair actually, the one I'd kept because it still faintly smelled like her perfume, and squared her shoulders like a general arriving at an occupied territory. "Hand over the account information," she said. "All $7 million. We need it wired by 5 o'clock today." I didn't move. I didn't speak. Ethan walked toward me, and I watched his face arrange itself into that careful, practiced expression he used whenever he wanted something. The soft eyes, the slight tilt of the head, the voice pitched low and warm like he was comforting a child. "Sweetheart," he said, placing one hand gently on my shoulder. "Mom and I decided to use it to pay Ryan's debts. We're family." I stared at his hand on my shoulder. I stared at his perfectly styled hair, the expensive watch I'd bought him for our 3rd anniversary, the faint trace of cologne he'd applied at dawn, before 6 in the morning, dressed and groomed, because he'd been planning this ambush since before the sun came up. I didn't argue. I simply walked away, and I left them with a surprise they would never forget. Let me back up, because you need to understand what that folder represented before you can understand why I did what I did. My mother, Clara Vance, was a registered nurse for 40 years. She worked the emergency room at Brooklyn Methodist for the first 20, then transferred to Mount Sinai's trauma unit for the last 2 decades. She pulled double shifts so frequently that the charge nurses used to joke that she had a cot hidden somewhere in the hospital basement. She never complained. Not once. She drove the same navy blue Honda Accord for 11 years. She patched her winter coats with iron-on fabric from the dollar store. She brought her lunch to work in the same faded Tupperware container every single day, usually rice, beans, and whatever vegetables were on sale at the bodega on Flatbush Avenue. I was her only child. My father left when I was 4, just disappeared one Tuesday morning, took the car and 2 suitcases and never sent a forwarding address. So it was me and Clara against the world. She raised me alone, put me through state college, and never once asked me for anything in return. What I didn't know, what nobody knew, was that my mother had been quietly, brilliantly investing every spare dollar she earned for nearly 30 years. She opened her first brokerage account in 1994 with $800 she'd saved from overtime pay. She read financial textbooks on her lunch breaks. She studied Warren Buffett's annual letters like they were scripture. She built a portfolio with the same discipline and patience she brought to emergency medicine. Slow, methodical, and devastatingly effective. When she died of a massive stroke at 63, slumped over in the break room at Mount Sinai with her reading glasses still on her face and a copy of Barron's Open on the table, the estate inventory revealed a portfolio worth just over $7 million. $7 million. My legs gave out when the probate attorney, a sharp woman named Diane Prescott, 22 years of estate law, partner at Whitfield and Prescott LLP downtown, read me the number. I sat down on the floor of her office and cried for 45 minutes. Not because of the money, because my mother had spent 4 decades swallowing exhaustion and loneliness and sacrifice, and she'd never spent a single cent of it on herself. That money was her swollen ankles after a 12-hour shift. It was every vacation she skipped, every restaurant she never visited, every small luxury she denied herself so the portfolio could compound for 1 more quarter. It was her entire life, translated into numbers, and Ethan wanted to hand it to his brother like a tip. I met Ethan Carter at a fundraiser gala in Manhattan when I was 26. He was charming, polished, and impossibly handsome. 6'2", dark hair, the kind of easy confidence that fills a room. He said all the right things. He opened doors. He sent flowers on Tuesdays for no reason. He remembered my mother's birthday without being reminded. I married him 14 months later. The first red flag appeared at our wedding reception. His mother, Linda, cornered me in the hallway outside the banquet hall while my mascara was still drying from happy tears. She gripped my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to make a point, and leaned in close enough that I could smell the Chardonnay on her breath. "You're a lucky girl, Sophia," she whispered. "Ethan could have had anyone. Don't forget that." I told myself it was just a possessive mother being dramatic. Red flag number 2, Ryan. Ethan's older brother was a perpetual disaster, charismatic, reckless, and constitutionally incapable of holding a job or honoring an obligation. In our first year of marriage, Ethan quietly wired Ryan $14,000 from our joint savings to cover a tax issue. I found out 3 months later when our savings account showed a balance $14,000 lighter than I'd expected. Ethan apologized profusely, swore it would never happen again. It happened again, twice. $8,500 for Ryan's business partner dispute, $22,000 for Ryan's emergency medical situation that turned out to be cosmetic dental work and a trip to Cabo. Each time, Ethan deployed the same playbook. look, the soft voice, the tilted head, the hand on my shoulder. He's my brother, Sophia. Family takes care of family. I should have left then. I know that now, but I loved him. Or I loved the version of him he'd showed me. The man who sent flowers on Tuesdays, who slow danced with me in the kitchen, who pressed his forehead against mine and whispered that I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. That man, I now understand, never actually existed. My mother died on a Thursday in October. I got the call from Mount Sinai at 2:17 p.m. while I was in the produce aisle of a Whole Foods on Atlantic Avenue. I remember because I was holding a bag of organic spinach, and I remember it hitting the floor, and I remember the woman behind me asking if I was okay, and I remember not being able to form words. Ethan drove me to the hospital. He held my hand in the waiting room. He rubbed my back while I identified her body. That was the last meaningful thing he did for the next 6 months. The morning after the funeral, he played golf. He said he needed to clear his head. He played golf every Saturday for the next 26 weeks while I emptied my mother's apartment alone, boxing up 40 years of a woman's life, packing her scrubs into garbage bags, finding her reading glasses on the nightstand beside a sticky note that read, "Call Sophia about Thanksgiving." I packed that apartment alone. Every box, every closet, every drawer. Ethan was always busy. A work thing. A commitment with Ryan. A gym session he couldn't reschedule. He was never cruel about it. He was simply, methodically, strategically absent. He attended 0 of the 12 meetings with Diane Prescott's office during the probate process. Not one. When I'd come home exhausted and heartsick from sorting through legal documents, he'd look up from his phone and say, "How'd it go, babe?" with the same tone you'd use to ask about someone's commute. I told myself he was processing grief differently. I told myself not everyone handles death the same way. I told myself to be patient with him. Then I found the browser history. It was a Sunday afternoon in January, 3 months before the probate closed. Ethan was out with Ryan, just grabbing lunch, he'd said. I was in his home office, looking for a box of old photographs of my mother that I thought I'd stored in his filing cabinet. Our shared iPad was on his desk. I picked it up to move it aside, and the screen lit up. His browser had 14 tabs open. I read every single one. Marital inheritance rights by state, New York. Can a spouse claim inherited assets in divorce? How long does probate take for estates over $5 million? Offshore wire transfer limits 2026. Community property versus equitable distribution. Inheritance exception. Best way to access spouse's trust fund. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the iPad. I set it down on the desk, walked to the bathroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bathtub, and pressed both palms flat against my thighs to stop the trembling. I didn't cry. Something inside me had shifted, some internal mechanism clicking into place, like a deadbolt sliding home. The weeping daughter, the patient wife, the woman who rationalized every red flag, she evaporated. In her place was someone cold, clear, and absolutely certain of what needed to happen next. I took screenshots of every tab. I emailed them to a brand new Gmail account I created on my phone, sophiavance.legalugmail.com. Then I cleared my fingerprints off the iPad, placed it back exactly where I found it, and walked out of the office. The next morning, I called Diane Prescott. "Diane," I said, "I need you to recommend the most aggressive, most ruthless estate protection attorney you know. Someone who specializes in asset shielding during high-conflict divorce." Diane was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, "I'm putting you in touch with Martin Calloway." Martin Calloway, 31 years of practice. Former federal prosecutor turned estate litigator. He'd handled asset protection for 3 Fortune 500 executives and 2 professional athletes during catastrophically ugly divorces. His hourly rate was $875. I didn't blink. I met Martin in his office on Park Avenue the following Tuesday. I brought the iPad screenshots, printed on glossy paper, arranged in chronological order. I brought a spreadsheet I'd built documenting every dollar Ethan had secretly funneled to Ryan over the past 5 years. $44,500 in total, all from our joint accounts, none of it discussed or authorized. Martin studied the documents for 20 minutes, his face expressionless. Then he looked up at me over his reading glasses. "Your husband is planning to claim your mother's inheritance the moment probate closes," he said flatly. "He's already researching how to move the money offshore before you can protect it." "I know," I said. "What do you want to do?" I leaned forward. "I want to make sure that when he reaches for that money, his hand closes on absolutely nothing." Martin Calloway smiled for the first time. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who enjoyed his work. Over the next 3 months, while Ethan played golf and drank beer with his brother and assumed his grieving, docile wife was quietly sleepwalking through probate paperwork, Martin and I built a fortress. The centerpiece was the Clara Vance Bloodline Irrevocable Generation Skipping Trust. Martin structured it as a spendthrift trust, which meant the assets inside it were legally untouchable by creditors, ex-spouses, lawsuits, anyone. The trust was managed by a third-party fiduciary board, 3 independent financial professionals with no connection to me, Ethan, or anyone in either family. I was named as the primary beneficiary, receiving a monthly stipend from trust dividends, but I had 0 ability to withdraw or redirect the principal. "This is the nuclear option," Martin told me as I signed the trust documents in his office on a Wednesday afternoon in March. "Once this is executed, the $7 million becomes legally unreachable. Your husband can hire every attorney in New York. He won't touch a dime." I signed every page without hesitation. Then Martin introduced me to the second layer of protection, a family law specialist named Dr. Dr. Rebecca Osei. She held both a JD and a PhD in forensic accounting, which meant she could simultaneously litigate a divorce and trace every hidden dollar through every shell account your soon-to-be ex had ever touched. She was terrifying. If your husband has been diverting marital funds to his brother without your consent, Dr. Osei told me during our first consultation, that constitutes dissipation of marital assets. It's actionable in divorce proceedings. Combined with what you're about to show me about his research into seizing your inheritance, we have a textbook case of financial infidelity. She paused. But I need something more concrete. I need him to commit an overt act, something documented, something undeniable, something a judge can't ignore. How overt? I asked. Ideally, something with his signature on it. I thought about Ethan's browser history. I thought about his confidence, his arrogance, his unshakable belief that I was too naive, too emotional, too busy grieving to notice what he was doing. He'll give us something, I said. He can't help himself. I was right. I was so catastrophically, perfectly right. On the morning of April 3rd, the day before my final probate meeting, Ethan made the most expensive mistake of his life. I know the details because Martin Calloway subpoenaed the records 2 weeks later. Here is what happened, reconstructed from financial documents, notarized affidavits, and the testimony of a very cooperative loan officer named Gerald Huang at Pacific Western Capital. At 9:15 a.m., Ethan Carter walked into the offices of a private lending firm. Not a bank, not a regulated financial institution, but a private credit operation that specialized in high-interest bridge loans for time-sensitive situations. The kind of place that advertises in the back of business magazines with no photos and a phone number with a 718 area code. Ethan met with the firm's principal, a man whose name appeared in court documents as Victor Sarkisian. He presented Victor with an emergency request, a $7 million bridge loan to be repaid within 48 hours at an annualized interest rate of 34%. The collateral? Our house. A 4-bedroom brownstone in Park Slope, Brooklyn, appraised at $3.5 million, fully paid off, jointly owned by Ethan Carter and Sophia Carter. The loan documents required both owners' signatures. Ethan signed his own name, then he signed mine. He forged my signature on a $7 million loan agreement. Gerald Huang, the loan officer who processed the paperwork, 8 years in private lending, notary public license number 01HU4487201, later told investigators that Ethan had been extremely agitated but confident and had assured him that my wife is fully aware and supportive of this arrangement but couldn't make it in person due to a family emergency. Gerald notarized the forged signature. The loan was approved and disbursed within 3 hours. By noon, the money was wired to a creditor account associated with Ryan Carter's outstanding debts. Debts owed to individuals that Ethan's own attorney would later describe in court filings as unlicensed private lenders operating outside regulatory oversight, loan sharks. Ryan owed $7 million to loan sharks, and Ethan had bet our home, forged my name, and staked everything on the assumption that by 5 p.m. the following day, he would have my dead mother's money in his hands to cover the whole thing. He walked through our front door at 6:02 a.m. the next morning with his mother beside him, ready to collect. He had no idea that I'd been waiting 3 months for exactly this moment. Now you understand the scene you walked into at the beginning. The manila folder on the counter, Linda's heels cracking against the hardwood, Ethan's hand on my shoulder. Sweetheart, Mom and I decided. So when I said I walked away, I didn't mean I left the room. I mean I walked to the dining table, set the manila folder down gently, and invited them to open it. Ethan practically lunged for it. He flipped it open with trembling fingers, expecting routing numbers, account codes, a cashier's check. His eyes scanned the first page. The Clara Vance bloodline, irrevocable generation, skipping trust. His face went white, not pale, white. The color drained out of him like someone had opened a valve. Sophia, what is this? There are no codes, Ethan, I said. My voice was steady, level, clinical. There's no routing information. The $7 million cleared probate this morning, but it was deposited directly into the trust. A trust I cannot access, withdraw from, or redirect. The principal is locked for 50 years. Linda started screaming. I won't reproduce the language. It was gutter-level profanity delivered at a volume that rattled the windows. The gist was that I was a liar, a thief, and several anatomical terms I'd rather not repeat. I waited for her to finish. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the second packet. This, I said, placing it on the table, is a fast-tracked petition for divorce, filed this morning by my attorney, Martin Calloway, on the grounds of severe financial infidelity, dissipation of marital assets, and, this is the important part, Ethan, felony forgery. Ethan staggered backward, his hip hit the couch. He sat down hard. My legal team obtained copies of the bridge loan documents you signed yesterday at Pacific Western Capital, I continued. You forged my signature on a $7 million loan, using our jointly owned home as collateral, without my knowledge or consent. I let that sit in the air for 3 seconds. An emergency injunction was granted by Judge Patricia Moreno of the Kings County Supreme Court at 7:45 this morning. All of your personal and business accounts are frozen, effective immediately, pending a full forensic audit. The house is under a legal freeze. You cannot sell it, leverage it, or transfer it. The silence was absolute. Then someone knocked on the front door. 3 knocks, heavy, deliberate, the kind of knocks that don't come from a delivery driver or a neighbor borrowing sugar. The door pushed open before anyone moved to answer it. it. 3 men stepped into the foyer. Tailored suits, dead eyes. The lead one, 6'4", a scar running across his jaw like a pencil line, slowly adjusted his jacket to reveal the handle of something holstered at his hip. He didn't draw it. He just wanted us to see it. He checked his watch, a heavy gold piece that probably cost more than most people's cars. "It's 4:30, Ethan," the man said. His voice was low, calm, bored. "The wire was due at 4. Our accounts show nothing incoming. We'd like to discuss the situation." Ethan scrambled to his feet so fast he knocked a vase off the console table. It shattered on the hardwood, porcelain shrapnel skittering across the floor. Linda, the woman who'd been screaming obscenities at me 30 seconds ago, went completely silent. She pressed herself behind her son like a child hiding behind a parent's leg. "There's been a delay," Ethan stammered, his voice cracking. "The money is there, I swear. My wife, she just needs to authorize the release. Sophia, tell them you'll release the funds." He pointed at me. He literally pointed his finger at me and tried to redirect 3 very dangerous men in my direction. I picked up my purse from the armchair, my mother's armchair. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder. I walked toward the front door. The lead man shifted slightly, blocking my path. "Hold on. He says you have our money." I looked him in the eye. I didn't blink. "I'm not his wife anymore," I said. "I didn't co-sign any loan. I didn't authorize the use of this property as collateral." He forged my signature. "There is an active court order freezing every asset attached to his name." I pulled the copy of Judge Moreno's injunction from my purse and pressed it against his chest. He grabbed it reflexively, glanced down, read the header. "That house you're standing in?" I said. "It's under a state-mandated legal freeze. If you try to seize it, you'll be dealing with the Kings County Prosecutor's Office and a federal fraud investigation. He has no money. He has no assets. He lied to you." The man's eyes moved from the document to me, then slowly, very slowly, to Ethan, who was hyperventilating in the living room, tears streaming down his face, his hands raised in a posture of total surrender. The man stepped aside. "Have a nice evening, ma'am," he said. "You too," I replied. I paused at the threshold. I looked back. Ethan was pressed against the far wall, his chest heaving. Linda was frozen behind the couch, both hands clamped over her mouth. The 3 men were moving toward them with the unhurried patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. "I suggest you find another way to pay these gentlemen, Ethan," I said. "Goodbye, Linda." I stepped out into the cool April evening. I pulled the door shut behind me. As I walked down the front steps of the brownstone I'd shared with a man I once loved, I heard, muffled through the heavy oak door, the sound of something breaking, then a thud, then Ethan's voice, high and shrill and panicked, begging. I kept walking. I got into the Uber I'd scheduled at 4:15. I told the driver to take me to the Wythe Hotel in Williamsburg, where Martin Calloway had reserved a suite for me under a name that wasn't mine. I didn't look back. 6 months later, I sat in the gallery of a Kings County courtroom and watched the system finish what I'd started. Ethan sat at the defense table in a cheap gray suit his public defender had probably bought at a discount store. He looked 10 years older. He had a limp. His left knee had been damaged badly enough during his encounter with Victor Sarkisian's associates that he'd needed reconstructive surgery. His nose sat slightly crooked on his face, improperly reset after being broken. The judge, the Honorable Raymond Castellano, 28 years on the bench, read the charges aloud. Felony wire fraud, mortgage fraud, criminal forgery in the 2nd degree, conspiracy to commit financial fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Gerald Huang, the loan officer, had cooperated fully with investigators in exchange for immunity. He'd provided the original forged documents, surveillance footage from Pacific Western Capital's lobby cameras, and time-stamped email correspondence between Ethan and Ryan Carter discussing the inheritance plan in explicit, damning detail. One email, sent from Ethan to Ryan on February 12, 2 months before probate closed, read in part, "Don't worry about it. Sophia doesn't have a clue. The second the money clears, I'll move it. She won't even know what happened until it's done." The prosecutor, Assistant DA Melinda Torres, read that email aloud in court. I watched Ethan's face as his own words echoed through the courtroom. He didn't look at me. He stared at the table. "Ethan Carter," Judge Castellano said, "for the charges of felony wire fraud, mortgage fraud, and premeditated forgery, I sentence you to 3 years in a state correctional facility, followed by 5 years of supervised probation and full restitution of all fraudulently obtained funds." Ethan put his face in his hands and wept. Behind him, in the second row of the gallery, Linda sat alone. She looked hollowed out, gaunt, gray, deflated. To prevent Ryan from being killed by his creditors, and to pay for Ethan's defense before the public defender took over, she'd liquidated her entire retirement portfolio and sold her 4-bedroom suburban home at a $200,000 loss. She was living in a 1-bedroom rental in Yonkers. Her friends from the country club had stopped returning her calls. Ryan had fled to Florida. Last anyone heard, he was working at a car wash in Sarasota and sleeping on a friend's couch. His debts had been restructured through a bankruptcy court, but the loan shark's interest hadn't vanished. It had simply been deferred. I sat in that courtroom and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no gloating. Just a vast, quiet emptiness where my marriage used to be, slowly filling with something that felt like the first warm day after a long winter. 1 year after the sentencing, I stood at a polished mahogany podium in the grand atrium of Columbia University's medical campus. I was wearing an emerald green suit my mother would have told me was too expensive, and I was holding a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors. A red silk ribbon stretched across the entrance to a brand new, state-of-the-art nursing simulation simulation laboratory. My mother, Clara Vance, spent 40 years in emergency rooms, I said into the microphone. The room was filled with faculty, donors, and 3 rows of nursing students who were about to receive full-ride scholarships funded by the trust's annual dividends. She never sought recognition. She never asked for anything. She just showed up, shift after shift, and saved lives. I looked at the students. Some of them were crying already. She taught me that real wealth isn't measured by what you take, I said. It's measured by what you build to protect the people who come after you. I cut the ribbon. The room erupted. The Clara Vance Memorial Nursing Wing opened that afternoon. 3 students, a single mother from the Bronx, a first-generation immigrant from Haiti, and a 20-year-old kid from Bed-Stuy who'd been working 2 jobs to afford community college, received full scholarships covering tuition, books, housing, and a monthly living stipend for 4 years. I shook their hands. I hugged them. I told them my mother would have been proud. I meant it. 2 years after the ribbon cutting, I was sitting on a terracotta terrace in Florence, Italy, barefoot, holding a glass of Chianti that cost more per bottle than my mother's monthly grocery budget. The irony wasn't lost on me. Below me, the city glowed amber and gold in the setting sun. Church bells tolled somewhere in the valley, a low, ancient, impossibly beautiful sound that vibrated in my chest like a second heartbeat. I'd spent the past year expanding the Clara Vance Foundation internationally, medical training grants in sub-Saharan Africa, nursing scholarships in the Philippines, an emergency fund for healthcare workers in conflict zones. My mother's $7 million, compounding quietly in the trust, managed by people far smarter than me, had already generated enough in dividends to fund programs she could never have imagined. My phone buzzed on the wrought iron table beside me. A text from Martin Calloway. FYI, received another letter from Carter's attorney requesting a meeting to discuss reconciliation and financial settlement. Filed it where we file all the others. I typed back, "Thank you, Martin." I set the phone down. I took a sip of wine. I thought about Ethan, not with anger. That had burned away long ago, like fuel consumed entirely by the engine it powered. I thought about him the way you think about a scar on your hand from a kitchen accident years ago. You remember the pain, you remember the blood, but the wound is closed and your hand works fine, and you've learned to be more careful with knives. I thought about Linda, alone in her apartment in Yonkers, surrounded by the ashes of the empire she'd tried to build on top of my mother's bones. I thought about my mother. I thought about her swollen feet, her patched coat, her Tupperware lunches, her reading glasses on the nightstand, the sticky note, "Call Sophia about Thanksgiving." I lifted my wine glass toward the golden Tuscan sky. "You told me to always protect what matters, Mom," I whispered. I did. The sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in bands of fire and amber and deep aching violet. The church bells faded to silence. The evening air smelled like jasmine and warm stone and the beginning of something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, unshakable, bone-deep peace. I set down my glass. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since my mother died, I let myself breathe without counting the seconds.